Hey guys, so I recently posted a community poll asking what you guys would like to see me make a video about. Unsurprisingly, literally no one responded. This of course means that I need to pick the topics, which brings us to... Keep in mind that these are in no particular order, but we'll start with the easiest one to install, and that's the LS swap. We'll start with the most important mod of all, and that's maintenance. If you're leaking oil into every cylinder through the valve seals, you're stalling out at red lights because your crank sensor is bad, and you haven't changed your oil in 10,000 miles, please don't peruse eBay for your next go fast part. Your engine is surprisingly pretty important when we're talking about driving from A to B. As someone who makes go fast parts, I would rather see an old engine get some money spent on maintenance before people place orders with me, and I have told clients this in the past. Getting the engine running at its peak before you mod does two things. And it makes the engine more reliable, and it gives your mods more potency because the engine isn't struggling just to stay running, especially if we're targeting intake efficiency by removing years of carbon buildup and sludge from the PCV valve. Now, the first official mod on this list is going to be the intake. This is generally every car guy's first mod. I know it was mine. I love this mod in particular because it really unlocks the sound of the engine, as well as changes how it feels and responds. The response part is going to come from switching the intake path material from rubber to something like aluminum. Of course, there are still nuances to that. The evidence I provided in my last video, which targeted short rams, OEM intakes, and cold air intakes, just shows that short rams are bad, and OEM intakes are just victims of heat soak due to the thermal properties from the material choice. So you're really better off getting it right the first time and going with something like a cold air intake. Real cold air intakes are a great choice for your first mod because they not only bring in colder, denser air, but it can really help something like a small displacement engine feel more powerful because you'll have more torque, so it'll be more usable. Another bonus is that they're pretty easy to install. You can install most cold air intakes with just a screwdriver. So if you just wanted something easy that you can install that's going to make an immediate noticeable difference, this is going to be a good first choice. Now, expanding on that, one lingering question I do get is,
do I need a tune for this?
Generally speaking, when you're installing simple intake and exhaust mods, the ECU is going to have enough headroom in the fuel tables to compensate, but it's also important to note that even a bone stock engine can pick up more power with a tune. So the short answer is generally you don't need one for simple bolt-ons, but there's always room for improvement. If you do get a cold air intake, just make sure it has some sort of bypass to protect the engine from water intrusion. That's all I can really recommend as a general rule. Which brings us to our second mod, which is exhaust. Now, there are a lot of cheap, low-quality exhausts out there, but there's also some really good, high-quality ones. For Accords and Hondas in general, I recommend Magnaflow. I think Magnaflow is a great company, and they make some really high-quality exhausts. They can be pretty expensive, depending on your budget. Mine in particular has a resonator and a muffler, which helps to bring down drone, and I just ran that along with a high-flow cat and an OEM header. The fitment was great, and all the components are pretty high quality. My only complaint is that I wish it was a little bit quieter. I like a more tame exhaust that's a good compromise between noise when I want it and a little bit of quiet when I don't. Personally, I feel like it makes the car more livable. Before I had my Magnaflow, I had a custom setup, and I drove the car to Florida, which was about a 1,000-mile trip, and after about 400 of those miles, I wanted to jump out of the car. So just keep in mind that you can get a raspy, loud exhaust, and it may be exciting in the beginning, but over time, you may just get sick of it. And again, with exhaust, there are a lot of nuances, things like exhaust pulse timing, back pressure, scavenging, but that's all for a different video, so we'll just keep this basic since they are the first mods. Now, the next mod is a bit of a tricky one because I see so many people not fully understanding it, and that is suspension. Let me be the first to tell you that the cheapest coilovers that you can find are probably going to be the most dangerous. This is an area where you should really spend a little bit more to get a reputable brand name product that's going to perform safely above all else. I personally have lost traction going over railroad tracks because my spring rate was just so ridiculously high, it would just bounce the chassis right off the road. Essentially what this mod does is it stiffens up your suspension and puts resistance between the chassis and the forces from turning, accelerating, braking also known as pitch, roll, and yaw. Your car will have more resistance against turns, so it'll take a turn more flat. The downside to even good coilovers, which is subjective, and that's ride quality. Some people will say a specific set is really good, some people say a specific set is really bad, but at the end of the day, it really is a trade-off. In my opinion, it's all about how important tight suspension is to you and how much you're willing to sacrifice ride quality. OEM suspension is designed to be compliant so that the ride is smooth. You won't find a mass production car that's slammed on the ground with an inch of clearance. OEMs make every effort to design a car that's practical first. We're talking about commuter cars here, not hypercars, not supercars. So my philosophy is just to keep as much of that practicality as possible. And what I do to achieve that is just run bigger wheels, wider tires, and I just allow as much suspension travel as I can aesthetically stand. So the bigger wheels will give you more ground clearance while filling up more of the wheel well, and it'll give you that aggressive look. The second thing is that it gives the suspension room to breathe so that bumps and normal undulations are pretty tolerable and they're not as harsh. With that said, in all likelihood, it still won't be as comfortable as your OEM setup was on bumpy roads. But what it will do is keep the chassis flatter during unexpected braking and cornering. Also keep in mind that the mods I listed are the ones that are going to make the biggest immediate difference when they're installed. I love mods that drastically change how the car feels over little details like valve stem caps and polished headlights. Now the difference really comes down to your budget and how mechanically inclined you are. Swapping out an exhaust might sound fun, but once you get that exhaust stud that looks like a stalagmite, you ain't seen nothing yet. On the flip side, changing an intake should be about 15-20 minutes. So really it comes down to what you're capable of, what you're equipped to do, and how much you really want to put into it. Now with that said, that's all I really have. This is just meant to be a brief overview and a basic video. I'll post another community poll in the upcoming weeks just to see what you guys may or may not want, and then we'll just go from there. So other than that, that's all I got, and I'll see you guys in the next one.